The morning sun painted golden streaks across the windows of Adelaide Cottage, as Catherine, Princess of Wales, sat quietly at her dressing table. Her reflection stared back at her, but today something felt different. The usual sparkle in her eyes seemed dimmed, replaced by a heaviness that she couldn't quite shake off. She had always been the picture of grace and composure, but lately the weight of royal duties and personal struggles had begun to show. William noticed the change immediately when he entered their bedroom. After 15 years together, he could read her emotions like an open book. The way she held her shoulders, the slight tremor in her hands as she applied her makeup, the forced smile she gave him in the mirror, everything told him that his wife was carrying a burden she hadn't shared with him yet. "Good morning, my love," he said softly. Placing his hands gently on her shoulders, Catherine leaned back against him, drawing comfort from his familiar warmth. They had weathered many storms together, from the intense media scrutiny during their courtship to the pressures of raising 3 children in the public eye. But this felt different, more personal, more final. The children's laughter echoed from downstairs as George, Charlotte, and Louis prepared for another day at school. Their innocent joy created a bittersweet soundtrack to the heavy atmosphere that had settled over their parents. Catherine had always been fiercely protective of their children's happiness, ensuring they experienced as normal a childhood as possible, despite their unique circumstances. "The children seem happy," William observed, though his voice carried an undertone of concern. He had noticed how Catherine had been spending extra time with them lately, reading longer bedtime stories, lingering during their morning routines, and creating more family moments than usual. It was as if she was trying to store up memories, though he couldn't understand why. Catherine finally turned to face him, and William saw something in her eyes that made his heart skip a beat. It wasn't sadness exactly, but rather a look of someone who had made a difficult decision and was now gathering the courage to share it. She reached for his hands, intertwining their fingers in the way that had always brought them both comfort. "William, we need to talk," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you, something important." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken implications. William felt a chill run down his spine, though he couldn't pinpoint exactly why her tone alarmed him so much. The sound of their protection officers moving about the house reminded them both that privacy was a luxury they rarely enjoyed completely. Even in their most intimate moments, the reality of their public roles was never far away. Catherine had often wondered what their life might have been like if they had been born as ordinary people, free to make choices without considering the impact on the monarchy or the British people. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together," William assured her, though he noticed how his own voice trembled slightly. "We always have, haven't we?" His words were meant to comfort, but they both knew that some challenges couldn't be overcome simply through love and determination. Sometimes life demanded sacrifices that tested even the strongest bonds. Catherine smiled at him then, a real smile that reached her eyes for the first time in weeks. "Yes, we always have," she agreed, squeezing his hands tighter. "But this time might be different, William. This time the choice might not be entirely ours to make." Her words were cryptic, but William sensed the gravity behind them. As they prepared to go downstairs and join their children for breakfast, both William and Catherine carried the weight of unspoken words and unresolved tensions. The morning routine continued as normal, helping the children with their school bags, sharing quick kisses goodbye, and watching them climb into their car with their protection detail. But underneath the normalcy, something fundamental was shifting. The day ahead was filled with the usual royal engagements. Catherine had a charity visit scheduled, while William had meetings with government officials. They had become masters at compartmentalizing their personal struggles, presenting united and confident faces to the public while privately dealing with whatever challenges life threw their way. But as Catherine watched William's car disappear down the drive, she felt a profound sense of finality wash over her. The conversation they needed to have would change everything, and she wasn't sure either of them was truly prepared for what lay ahead. The decision she had made hadn't come easily, and she knew that sharing it with William would be one of the hardest things she had ever done. The morning air was crisp and clear, but Catherine barely noticed as she walked back into their home. Each step felt weighted with the knowledge of what was coming, and for the first time in her adult life, she wasn't sure how the story would end. All she knew was that by the end of the day, their lives would be forever changed, and the quiet goodbye she had been rehearsing in her mind would finally become reality. The house felt unusually quiet without William and the children, giving Catherine time to reflect on the journey that had brought them to this moment. She thought about their wedding day, the birth of their children, the countless public appearances where they had stood side by side, and all the private moments that had made their marriage so special. Each memory felt precious now, like photographs she was carefully filing away for safekeeping. As the clock ticked toward evening, Catherine knew that the time for difficult conversations was approaching. She had delayed this moment for as long as possible, hoping that circumstances might change or that another solution might present itself. But sometimes love meant making the hardest choice of all, even when it broke your heart to do so. The afternoon sun was beginning to set when William returned home from his engagements, his mind still buzzing with the day's meetings and responsibilities. As his car pulled through the gates of Adelaide Cottage, he felt the familiar sense of relief that came with returning to his sanctuary. But today something felt different. The house seemed too quiet, almost as if it was holding its breath. Catherine was waiting for him in their private sitting room, the one space in their home that felt truly theirs, away from the formal reception rooms where they entertained guests and conducted official business. She had changed out of her formal day clothes into a simple sweater and jeans, the kind of outfit she wore when she wanted to feel like herself rather than the Princess of Wales. Her hands were wrapped around a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. "How was your day?" William asked, settling into the chair across from her. It was their usual routine, this quiet debriefing time when they shared the highlights and challenges of their separate schedules. But today, Catherine's response wasn't about the charity she had visited or the children she had met. Instead, she looked at him with those same serious eyes he had noticed that morning. "William, do you remember when we first talked about what our life would be like?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. "Before we were married, when we were just two young people trying to figure out if we could make this work?" William nodded, remembering those long conversations they had shared during their university days and the years that followed. They had been so young then, so optimistic about their ability to balance love with duty. "We knew it wouldn't be easy," William replied, reaching across to take her hand. "But we thought we could handle anything as long as we were together." The words felt heavier now than they had back then, weighted with the reality of 15 years of public scrutiny, personal challenges, and the constant pressure of royal life. Catherine smiled sadly. "We were so naive, weren't we? We thought love would be enough to overcome everything." She paused, gathering her courage for what came next. "William, I've been offered something. An opportunity that could change everything for me, for us, for our family." Her words were carefully chosen, but William could hear the pain behind them. The opportunity had come through one of Catherine's patronages, a chance to lead a major international humanitarian organization based in Geneva. It was the kind of role she had always dreamed of, a position where she could make a real difference in the world, beyond the ceremonial duties that filled most of her days. The organization had approached her months ago, knowing that her involvement could bring unprecedented attention and resources to their cause. "They want me to consider becoming their global ambassador and eventually take over as director." Catherine continued, her voice growing stronger as she spoke about the work that excited her. "It would mean traveling extensively, being based in Switzerland, and having the freedom to focus entirely on the causes I'm passionate about." William listened in silence, understanding beginning to dawn on him. The children had been her primary concern when making this decision. George was approaching an age where his own royal duties would begin to take shape, but Charlotte and Louis were still young enough to adapt to a different kind of life. The organization had assured her that family accommodation could be arranged, that the children could attend excellent international schools, and that they would support whatever arrangement worked best for the family. "But what about your royal duties?" William asked, though he already knew the answer would be complicated. Catherine had spent years building her portfolio of patronages and becoming an integral part of the royal family's public work. Walking away from those responsibilities wouldn't be simple, and it certainly wouldn't be without controversy. "That's what makes this so difficult," Catherine admitted, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "I would have to step back from my official royal duties. Not completely, perhaps, but significantly. I wouldn't be able to continue as I have been. The implications were enormous, and both of them knew it. The royal family had already weathered significant changes in recent years, and Catherine's departure from full-time royal duties would send shockwaves through the institution. William sat in stunned silence, processing what his wife had just told him. He understood her passion for humanitarian work and had always admired her dedication to the causes she supported. But the idea of her leaving their shared life, even temporarily, felt like a physical blow. Their partnership had been one of the strongest aspects of the modern monarchy, and their joint appearances had helped to modernize and humanize the royal family in the public eye. "Have you made your decision?" he asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Catherine looked at him with such love and pain in her eyes that it took his breath away. She had been agonizing over this choice for months, weighing her personal desires against her duty to the crown, her family, and the British people who had come to love and respect her. "I want to say yes," she whispered, the words feeling both liberating and terrifying as she spoke them aloud for the first time. "This is everything I've ever wanted to do with my life, William. It's the chance to make a real difference, to use everything I've learned over the past 15 years in a way that could help millions of people." Her passion was evident, but so was her pain at the thought of what accepting would mean. The room fell silent except for the soft ticking of the antique clock on the mantelpiece. Outside, they could hear the distant sounds of their protection officers going about their duties, a constant reminder of the world they inhabited and the responsibilities that came with their positions. William reached for Catherine's hands, holding them tightly as they both contemplated a future that looked very different from the one they had imagined. "What would this mean for us?" William asked, voicing the question that terrified him most. Catherine's eyes filled with tears as she considered her response. She had asked herself the same question countless times, and the answer never got easier to contemplate. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "I wish I could tell you that nothing would change between us, but that wouldn't be true. This would change everything, and I'm not sure either of us can predict what that would look like." The honesty in her words was both heartbreaking and admirable, a reflection of the trust they had built over their years together. The following days passed in a blur of strained normalcy. William and Catherine continued their royal duties, smiling for cameras and engaging with the public as they always had. But those closest to them could sense the tension beneath the surface. Their staff noticed the longer than usual private conversations, the way they seemed to study each other during public appearances, and the quiet intensity that had settled over the household. At breakfast, the children chattered about their school projects and upcoming events, blissfully unaware of the life-changing decision their parents were grappling with. Catherine found herself memorizing these moments with an intensity that bordered on desperation. The way George wrinkled his nose when Charlotte teased him, Louis's infectious giggle when his father made silly faces, the comfortable chaos of their morning routine. Everything felt both precious and fragile. William was struggling with emotions he hadn't experienced since his mother's death. The thought of Catherine leaving, even for the noblest of reasons, awakened a fear of abandonment he thought he had conquered years ago. He found himself watching her during their public engagements, noting how naturally she connected with people, how genuinely she cared about the causes she supported, and how constrained she sometimes seemed by the formal protocols of royal life. During a quiet moment between engagements, William called his father. King Charles, despite his own demanding schedule, immediately sensed the gravity in his son's voice and cleared time for a private conversation. They met in the king's study at Clarence House, a room filled with personal photographs and mementos that spoke to the continuity of royal duty across generations. "She wants to leave," William said simply, the words feeling foreign in his mouth. Charles listened without interruption as his son explained Catherine's opportunity and the impossible choice she faced. The king's expression remained thoughtful throughout, his years of experience with duty versus personal desire evident in his understanding nod. "And what do you want, William?" Charles asked finally. It was a question that cut straight to the heart of the matter. William had been so focused on Catherine's struggle and the implications for the monarchy that he hadn't fully examined his own feelings beyond the immediate pain of potential loss. "I want her to be happy," William admitted, the words coming out more raw than he had intended. "But I also want her to stay. I want our life to continue as it has been. I want our children to grow up with both their parents present and engaged in their daily lives." The conflict in his voice was evident, and Charles recognized the same struggle he had faced many times throughout his own life. Meanwhile, Catherine was having her own difficult conversations. She had lunch with her sister Pippa, the first person she had confided in about the opportunity. Pippa, ever the protective sister, had listened with a mixture of excitement for Catherine's potential new path and concern about what it would mean for her family. "Are you sure this is what you want?" Pippa asked as they sat in a quiet corner of a private club, away from the prying eyes and ears that followed Catherine everywhere. "You've built such a beautiful life with William and the children. Is this worth risking all of that?" It was a question Catherine had asked herself countless times, and the answer wasn't simple. "I love my family more than anything," Catherine replied, her voice steady but her hands trembling slightly. "But I also love the work itself. When I'm visiting those hospitals, meeting with young people struggling with mental health issues or working on early childhood development projects, I feel like I'm truly making a difference. This opportunity would allow me to do that on a scale I never imagined possible." The weight of her royal title had always been both a privilege and a burden. The access it provided to important people and causes was incredible, but it also came with limitations and protocols that sometimes frustrated her humanitarian instincts. The opportunity in Geneva represented a chance to work without those constraints, to be judged purely on her abilities and dedication, rather than her marriage and title. That evening, William and Catherine attempted to have a normal family dinner, but the conversation they needed to have hung over them like a storm cloud. The children sensed something was different, and kept looking between their parents with the intuitive concern that children often display when their stable world feels slightly off balance. After the children were in bed, William and Catherine took a walk through the gardens of their home. The evening air was cool and crisp, and the privacy of their grounds allowed them to speak freely for the first time in days. They walked in silence for several minutes, both lost in their own thoughts and struggling to find the right words. "I've been thinking about what you said," William began, his voice careful and measured, "about this being everything you've ever wanted to do with your life." "I understand that feeling, Catherine. I really do." His words were generous, but Catherine could hear the pain underneath them. "But I can't pretend that the thought of you leaving doesn't terrify me," he continued, stopping to face her directly, not just because of what it would mean for the monarchy or our public duties, but because of what it would mean for us, for our marriage, for our family, for everything we've built together. His honesty was both brave and heartbreaking. Catherine reached for his hands, holding them tightly as she searched for the right words. "I know," she whispered. "It terrifies me too. But William, what if this is my chance to do something truly meaningful with my life? What if I pass this up and spend the rest of my years wondering what could have been?" The question hung between them, unanswerable and painful. They talked late into the night, exploring every angle of the decision. They discussed practical matters like the children's education and their own relationship across distance. They talked about the precedent Catherine's departure would set and what it might mean for future royal spouses. They considered whether this could be a temporary arrangement or if accepting would mean a permanent change in their life's direction. As the clock struck midnight, they were no closer to a resolution, but they were both clearer about the magnitude of what they were facing. This wasn't just a career decision. It was a choice that would define the rest of their lives and potentially change the nature of their family forever. The quiet goodbye Catherine had imagined was beginning to feel more real and more painful than either of them had anticipated. George was the first to notice that something was seriously wrong. At 11 years old, he had inherited his father's perceptiveness and his mother's emotional intelligence. He began to observe his parents more carefully during their family time, noting the forced cheerfulness in their voices and the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. The atmosphere in their home had shifted, and even though his parents tried to maintain normalcy, George could feel the undercurrent of tension. It was during their usual Sunday morning family breakfast that George decided to address what he had been observing. Charlotte and Louis were engaged in their typical weekend morning silliness, building towers with their pancakes and giggling at their own creativity. But George sat quietly, studying his parents with the serious expression that reminded Catherine so much of William at that age. "Mummy," "Are you and Papa getting divorced?" George asked suddenly, his voice cutting through the morning chatter like a knife. The question was so direct and unexpected that both William and Catherine froze, their coffee cups halfway to their lips. Charlotte and Louis immediately stopped their play, sensing the gravity of their brother's question even if they didn't fully understand it. "Oh, sweetheart, no," Catherine said quickly, reaching across the table to take George's hand. "Papa and I love each other very much. We're not getting divorced." Her reassurance was genuine, but George's sharp eyes caught the glance she exchanged with William, and he knew there was more to the story. "But something's wrong," George persisted, his voice trembling slightly. "You've been different lately. You both have, and yesterday I heard you crying in your room, Mummy." His observation hit Catherine like a physical blow. She had thought she was being so careful to shield the children from their adult concerns. But George's words reminded her that children often see and hear far more than parents realize. William cleared his throat, making a decision in that moment that would change the trajectory of their family conversation. "George is right," he said quietly, looking first at Catherine and then at all three of their children. "Something is happening that we need to talk about as a family." Catherine's eyes widened in surprise, but she recognized the wisdom in William's decision to be honest with their children. "Are we moving again?" Charlotte asked, her 9-year-old mind immediately jumping to the most dramatic change she could imagine. Their recent move to Adelaide Cottage had been a big adjustment for all the children, and the thought of another upheaval worried her. "Not exactly, darling," Catherine said gently, her mind racing as she tried to figure out how to explain such a complex situation to her children. "Mummy has been offered a very important job, one that would help children all around the world. But taking this job would mean some big changes for our family." Louis, at 6 years old, was still trying to understand what was happening, but he could sense the seriousness in his parents' voices. He moved closer to Catherine, instinctively seeking comfort from the growing tension in the room. Catherine lifted him onto her lap, drawing strength from his warm presence. "What kind of changes?" George asked, his voice steady, but his eyes betraying his anxiety. He had already experienced enough change in his young life, and the thought of more uncertainty made him feel scared in a way he couldn't quite articulate. William and Catherine exchanged a long look, silently communicating about how much to share and how to frame the conversation. They had always tried to be age-appropriately honest with their children, believing that trust was built through truthfulness rather than protection through deception. The job would be in another country, Catherine explained carefully. It would mean that Mummy would need to travel a lot and might need to live somewhere else for parts of the year. Even as she said the words, Catherine felt her heart breaking at the confusion and fear that immediately appeared on her children's faces. "But what about us?" Charlotte asked, her voice small and worried. "Would we stay here with Papa or would we come with you?" The practical questions from her children made the reality of the situation even more stark for Catherine. These weren't just abstract considerations anymore. They were real concerns that would affect the daily lives of the 3 people she loved most in the world. "We don't know yet," William answered honestly. "That's what Mummy and I have been trying to figure out. There are a lot of things we need to think about, including what would be best for all of you." His words were meant to be reassuring, but Catherine could see that the uncertainty was actually making the children more anxious. George, ever the responsible older brother, seemed to be processing the information differently than his siblings. "Is this about helping people who don't have enough food or medicine?" he asked, remembering some of the charity work he had seen his mother do, like when you visit those hospitals and schools. His question showed a maturity that both impressed and saddened his parents. "Yes, exactly like that," Catherine said, her voice filled with pride at her son's understanding. "But it would be helping children all over the world, not just in Britain. It's the kind of work that could make a really big difference in many people's lives." She could see George thinking through the implications, his young mind trying to balance his love for his mother with his understanding of the importance of helping others. "Would you be happier doing that job than being a princess?" Charlotte asked with the blunt honesty that only children possess. The question struck at the heart of Catherine's dilemma in a way that all the adult conversations hadn't quite managed to do. Catherine paused for a long moment, considering how to answer her daughter's deceptively simple question. "I love being your Mummy and Papa's wife more than anything in the world," she said finally. Being a princess has given me opportunities to help people that I'm very grateful for. But this new job would let me help people in ways that I've always dreamed about." Her answer was honest but gentle, acknowledging her daughter's question while trying not to make the children feel responsible for her decision. The conversation continued for over an hour, with the children asking questions that ranged from practical concerns about their daily routines to deeper worries about whether their family would stay together. William and Catherine answered as honestly as they could while trying to provide reassurance about their love and commitment to the family's well-being. By the end of the discussion, all three children understood that their mother was facing a difficult choice, and that whatever decision she made would affect all of their lives. But they also understood that both of their parents loved them deeply and would make whatever choice they thought was best for the family as a whole. As they cleaned up from breakfast, George approached his mother privately. "Mummy," he said quietly, "if this job would make you really happy, then maybe you should take it. We'll figure out how to make it work." His words, spoken with the wisdom of someone far older than his 11 years, brought tears to Catherine's eyes and made her realize that her children might be more resilient and understanding than she had given them credit for. The deadline for Catherine's response was approaching faster than either she or William were ready for. The humanitarian organization needed an answer within the week, as they had to finalize their plans for the coming year and couldn't wait indefinitely for her decision. The pressure of the ticking clock added an urgency to their discussions that made every conversation feel weighted with finality. Catherine had spent the morning in her private office, staring at the formal job offer that lay open on her desk. The terms were even more generous than she had initially understood. The organization was prepared to work around her family's needs in ways that seemed almost too good to be true. They offered flexible scheduling, family accommodation in Geneva, and even the possibility of establishing a satellite office in London for part of the year. But despite the attractive terms, Catherine knew that accepting would still mean fundamental changes to the life she and William had built together. Their partnership had been both personal and professional for so many years that separating those aspects felt like trying to unweave a tapestry without damaging the whole cloth. William found her there that afternoon, surrounded by documents and looking more conflicted than he had seen her in years. He sat down across from her desk, noting the way her hands trembled slightly as she gestured toward the papers spread before her. "I keep reading through all of this," Catherine said, her voice tired from days of internal debate. "And every time I do, I become more convinced that this is an opportunity I may never have again. But then I think about leaving you and the children, even temporarily, and I feel like I'm being asked to choose between two different versions of myself." Her words captured the essence of her struggle. Perfectly, William had been doing his own thinking and research over the past few days. He had spoken confidentially with several advisors, explored the constitutional implications of Catherine stepping back from royal duties, and most importantly, spent time reflecting on what he truly wanted for his wife and family. "Catherine, I need to tell you something," William said, his voice carrying a gravity that made her look up from the documents. "I've been selfish. This whole time I've been thinking about what your leaving would mean for me, for our public duties, for the monarchy, but I haven't been thinking enough about what staying might mean for you." His admission was honest and painful, but it opened a door to a different kind of conversation. "I've watched you work with those charities and organizations over the years," William continued, leaning forward in his chair. "I've seen how alive you become when you're really able to dive into the work, how frustrated you get when protocol limits what you can do. I've seen you bite your tongue when you want to speak more freely about issues you care about, and I've watched you navigate the constraints of royal life with more grace than anyone has a right to expect." His words were filled with admiration and a growing understanding of her perspective. Catherine felt tears beginning to form as she listened to her husband articulate feelings she hadn't fully expressed even to herself. "But what about us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What about our marriage, our family? I can't bear the thought of my choices hurting the people I love most." Her fear was genuine and heartbreaking. "What if we found a way to make it work?" William asked, an idea beginning to form as he spoke. "What if instead of seeing this as you leaving us, we found a way to support your work while keeping our family together?" His suggestion was tentative, but Catherine could hear the sincerity in his voice. They spent the rest of the afternoon exploring possibilities that neither had seriously considered before. What if the children could spend part of their school years in Switzerland, gaining international experience that could benefit them throughout their lives? What if William could arrange his royal duties to allow for more travel to Geneva, turning Catherine's work into a family project rather than a solo venture? The more they talked, the more creative their solutions became. They discussed the possibility of establishing a foundation that could bridge Catherine's humanitarian work with her royal responsibilities. They explored ways that her new role could actually enhance the monarchy's global reach and relevance. They even considered how this change might set a positive precedent for future royal spouses who wanted to pursue meaningful careers alongside their royal duties. "You know," William said as the sun began to set outside Catherine's office window, "maybe this isn't about choosing between two different versions of yourself. Maybe it's about finding a way to be both versions at the same time." His words resonated with Catherine in a way that surprised her. That evening, they called a family meeting with the children. George, Charlotte, and Louis gathered in their parents' bedroom, sensing that this conversation would be different from the ones they had been having all week. The atmosphere was still serious, but there was something lighter about their parents' demeanor that the children noticed immediately. "We've been thinking about everything we discussed," Catherine began, looking at each of her children in turn, "and we've realized that we've been approaching this all wrong. Instead of thinking about this opportunity as something that would separate our family, we want to explore how it might bring us together in new ways." The children listened intently, their faces showing a mixture of curiosity and cautious optimism. William explained their emerging plan to spend parts of each year in Switzerland, where the children could attend international schools and learn new languages, while Catherine pursued her humanitarian work. They talked about the adventures the family could have together, the different cultures they could experience, and the ways that Catherine's work could become something the whole family could be proud of and involved in. "So we wouldn't have to choose between Mummy and staying in England?" Charlotte asked, her relief evident in her voice. The idea that they could have both had clearly been weighing on her more than she had expressed. "We would still need to work out all the details," Catherine cautioned, not wanting to promise more than they could deliver. "But yes, the goal would be to find a way for our family to stay together while still allowing Mummy to do this important work." Her words were careful but hopeful. George, who had been quiet throughout most of the conversation, finally spoke up. "I think it sounds exciting," he said, his voice carrying a maturity that continued to amaze his parents. "And I think other people will see that our family can do important work together, not just separately." His insight into the broader implications of their decision showed a sophisticated understanding of their public role. As the children prepared for bed that night, Catherine and William felt something they hadn't experienced in weeks: genuine excitement about the future. The path forward wouldn't be easy, and there would be countless details to work out, but for the first time, they could envision a solution that honored both Catherine's aspirations and their commitment to each other and their family. The next morning, Catherine picked up her phone to call the humanitarian organization. Her hands were steady as she dialed, and her voice was clear when she spoke. "I'd like to accept your offer," she said, "but I have some conditions we need to discuss." The conversation that followed would reshape not just her own future, but potentially the future of royal service itself. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of careful planning and delicate negotiations. Catherine's acceptance of the humanitarian role came with conditions that required extensive discussions between the royal household, the organization in Geneva, and various government officials. The arrangement they were proposing was unprecedented in modern royal history, and every detail needed to be carefully considered for its implications on both the monarchy and Catherine's new role. The palace communications team worked around the clock to craft the announcement that would explain this significant change to the British public and the world. They knew that the news would be met with surprise, curiosity, and likely some criticism. The challenge was to present Catherine's decision in a way that honored both her service to the crown and her commitment to humanitarian work. King Charles had been surprisingly supportive once he understood the full scope of the plan. In a private meeting with William and Catherine, he had expressed admiration for their creative solution and acknowledged that the monarchy needed to evolve with the times. "Your mother would have been proud," he told William, referencing Diana's own passion for humanitarian causes. She always believed that our family should use its platform to make a real difference in the world. The children had adapted to the idea with the resilience that young people often display when faced with change. George had thrown himself into learning about Switzerland and international development work, while Charlotte had become excited about the prospect of becoming fluent in French. Louis, still the youngest and most adaptable, simply seemed happy that the family would be staying together. On a crisp Tuesday morning in November, Kensington Palace released the carefully crafted statement that would change everything. The announcement began by highlighting Catherine's 15 years of dedicated service to the British people and her particular passion for causes affecting children and families worldwide. It then explained her new role as global ambassador and future director of the International Children's Foundation, emphasizing how this position would allow her to expand her impact on a global scale. The statement carefully explained the innovative arrangement that would allow Catherine to maintain her royal duties while pursuing this new role. She would continue to serve as patron of her existing charities and would participate in major royal events and state occasions. However, her day-to-day schedule would be restructured to accommodate her humanitarian work, and the family would spend several months each year based in Geneva. The reaction was immediate and intense. News outlets around the world picked up the story within hours, with headlines ranging from supportive to skeptical. Some praised Catherine's commitment to humanitarian work and saw the arrangement as a modernization of royal roles. Others questioned whether a working royal could effectively serve two masters and worried about the precedent this might set. Social media exploded with opinions, memes, and speculation about what this change really meant for the royal family. The hashtag Catherine Geneva began trending globally, with supporters sharing stories of the princess's humanitarian work over the years and critics questioning the wisdom of the arrangement. William and Catherine had prepared for the public reaction, but the intensity of the media coverage was still overwhelming. They had agreed to give a joint television interview the evening after the announcement to address questions and provide more context for their decision. The interview, conducted in their home at Adelaide Cottage, would be their chance to speak directly to the British people about this significant change. As they sat together for the interview, both William and Catherine appeared calm and united, but those who knew them well could see the signs of stress beneath their composed exteriors. The interviewer's questions were respectful but probing, covering everything from the practical logistics of their new arrangement to the deeper questions about duty, service, and modern royal life. "Your Royal Highness," the interviewer asked Catherine, "some people are wondering whether this new role represents a departure from traditional royal service. How do you respond to those concerns?" It was the question they had been expecting, and Catherine answered with the poise and thoughtfulness that had characterized her public speaking for years. "I understand those concerns," Catherine replied, her voice steady and clear. "But I would argue that this role actually represents a continuation and expansion of royal service, not a departure from it. The monarchy has always been at its best when it serves the people, and this position allows me to serve not just the British people, but children and families around the world who are facing the same challenges we work to address here at home." William added his own perspective, emphasizing how the arrangement would strengthen rather than weaken their family's contribution to public service. "Catherine's work has always been about making a real difference in people's lives," he said. "This new role simply gives her a larger platform to do that work. As a family, we're committed to showing that royal service can evolve and adapt while maintaining its core values of duty and service." The interviewer also asked about the children and how this change would affect them. Both parents spoke warmly about their excitement for their children to experience different cultures and gain a global perspective that would serve them well throughout their lives. They emphasized that the children's education and well-being remained their top priority and that every aspect of their new arrangement had been designed with the children's best interests in mind. One of the most poignant moments in the interview came when the interviewer asked about the emotional difficulty of making such a significant decision. Catherine's eyes filled with tears as she spoke about the weeks of agonizing over the choice and the fear that she might be letting people down. "It wasn't an easy decision," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I've loved every moment of my royal duties, and the thought of changing that relationship was genuinely heartbreaking. But William helped me realize that sometimes the greatest act of service is having the courage to step into roles where you can make the biggest difference, even when that means making difficult changes. William reached over to take her hand during this part of the interview, a gesture that spoke to their unity and mutual support. "We've always been a team," he said simply. "That's not changing. If anything, this new adventure will make us an even stronger team." The interview concluded with questions about their hopes for the future and how they saw this change affecting the monarchy in the long term. Both William and Catherine expressed optimism that their arrangement could serve as a model for how royal families could adapt to the modern world while maintaining their relevance and service to the people. As the cameras stopped rolling and the interview crew began packing up their equipment, William and Catherine felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. They had shared their story with the world and would now have to wait to see how the public ultimately responded to their unprecedented decision. The immediate reaction to the interview was largely positive, with many viewers expressing admiration for the couple's honesty and their innovative approach to balancing family, duty, and personal fulfillment. However, they knew that the real test would come in the months ahead as they worked to implement their new arrangement and prove that it could work effectively for everyone involved. 6 months later, the day had finally arrived. Catherine stood in the same bedroom where this journey had begun, but now instead of uncertainty, there was a quiet sense of purpose in her movements. Her suitcases were packed not just with clothes, but with hopes, dreams, and the weight of a decision that had transformed from a source of anguish into a pathway toward a new kind of service. The morning was crisp and clear, with the kind of English spring weather that made everything feel fresh and full of possibility. Downstairs, the children were finishing their breakfast, their conversation a mixture of excitement about their upcoming adventure and the natural nervousness that comes with major life changes. They had all grown during these months of preparation, becoming more mature and globally minded as they learned about their new life in Geneva. William had been awake since dawn, not because he couldn't sleep, but because he wanted to savor these last quiet moments in the home that had sheltered their family through so many important milestones. As he watched Catherine move through their room, selecting the last few items for her journey, he was struck by how much had changed since that difficult morning when she had first shared her opportunity with him. The months of preparation had been challenging but ultimately strengthening for their relationship. Working together to solve the practical problems of their new arrangement had reminded them both why they had fallen in love in the first place. Their shared commitment to making this work for everyone involved had deepened their partnership in ways neither had expected. "Are you ready for this?" William asked, coming to stand behind Catherine as she closed her final suitcase. His arms wrapped around her waist and she leaned back against him, drawing comfort from his familiar warmth. The question carried layers of meaning beyond the simple logistics of travel. "I think so," Catherine replied, turning in his arms to face him. "For the first time in months, I feel like we're all moving forward together instead of me choosing something that would take me away from you." Her words reflected the transformation in how they both viewed this change, from a painful separation to a shared adventure. The family's final breakfast together in England was both celebratory and bittersweet. They had made this meal a tradition, gathering around their kitchen table one last time before embarking on what they had all come to call their Geneva adventure. The children had prepared special goodbye cards for their English friends and teachers, while William and Catherine had spent time with their staff, expressing gratitude for their support during this transition. George had matured remarkably during the preparation period, taking on the role of big brother with new seriousness as he helped Charlotte and Louis understand what their new life would be like. His questions about international relations and humanitarian work had impressed his parents and shown them that this experience was already broadening his perspective in valuable ways. "Mummy," Charlotte said as they cleared their breakfast dishes, "when we come back to visit, will our room still be exactly the same?" Her question reflected the natural anxiety children feel about change, but also the trust she had developed that this was truly an adventure rather than a permanent goodbye to everything familiar. "Absolutely," Catherine assured her, giving her daughter a warm hug. "This will always be our home and these will always be your rooms. We're just adding another home to our family, not replacing this one." The reassurance was genuine, and had been carefully planned to help the children feel secure throughout the transition. As their car arrived to take them to the airport, the small group of staff who had become like family gathered to see them off. There were tears and hugs, but also excitement and pride in what the family was setting out to accomplish. The household staff had been instrumental in making the complex logistics of their new arrangement possible, and their support had meant everything to William and Catherine. The drive to the airport was filled with a mixture of nervous energy and quiet reflection. The children pointed out familiar landmarks, commenting on things they would miss and things they were excited to see in their new temporary home. William and Catherine held hands in the back seat, both lost in their own thoughts about the magnitude of what they were undertaking. At the airport, a small group of photographers and journalists had gathered to document their departure. William and Catherine had agreed to a brief statement and photo opportunity, understanding that public interest in their new arrangement remained high. They wanted to project confidence and unity, showing the world that this change was strengthening rather than dividing their family. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for our family," Catherine said to the gathered media, her voice clear and confident. "We're grateful for the support we've received from the British people, as we've worked to create an arrangement that allows us to serve both at home and abroad. This isn't goodbye to our royal duties or to Britain. It's hello to a broader definition of service," William added. "We've always believed that the monarchy is at its strongest when it's relevant to people's daily lives and global challenges. Catherine's new role allows our family to be part of solutions to problems that affect children everywhere, including here in Britain. We're excited about the work ahead and grateful for this opportunity to serve in a new way." As they prepared to board their plane, each family member took a moment for their own private goodbye to England. For the children, it was the excitement of adventure mixed with the natural sadness of leaving friends and familiar places. For William, it was pride in his wife's courage and excitement about supporting her in this new role. For Catherine, it was a quiet sense of completion, knowing that she was finally able to pursue the work she had always felt called to do without sacrificing the family relationships. That meant everything to her. The flight to Geneva was filled with anticipation and planning. The family used the travel time to review their new schedules, discuss their goals for the first few months, and share their individual hopes for this new phase of their lives. The children had prepared presentations about Swiss culture and the work of the International Children's Foundation, showing the depth of preparation that had gone into this transition. As their plane began its descent into Geneva, Catherine looked out the window at the city that would become their second home. The sight of Lake Geneva and the surrounding mountains filled her with a sense of possibility and purpose that she hadn't felt in years. This wasn't the quiet goodbye she had once imagined. It was a bold hello to a future that honored both her personal calling and her family's commitment to service. William reached over and squeezed her hand as the plane touched down. "Ready to change the world, Mrs. Wales?" he asked with a smile that combined love, pride, and just a touch of the mischief that had first attracted her to him all those years ago. "Ready?" Catherine replied, squeezing his hand in return. "Let's show them what a royal family can really do when they work together." As they gathered their belongings and prepared to step into their new life, all 5 members of their family felt the excitement of beginning an adventure that would test them, change them, and ultimately make them stronger as both individuals and as a family united in purpose.